Matt led the way through the deserted concourse area of the stadium. Sue and Luke were close behind while Penelope was struggling to keep up. She was still grunting from the pain of the burns she had received from the Vespid's blood spraying all over her. But when Matt glanced back, he saw her mouth set in a determined line. They didn't have the options to slow down for her. They had to run. There was no other choice. Further behind, he glimpsed the Vespids chasing them. There were 4 bounding across the cracked concrete ground, howling and growling. Their long, spindly, spider-like legs scraped along the ground, and their razor-sharp teeth, which lined their mouths in 3 separate rows, rotated like a saw. Ahead of them, Matt saw another corridor leading to the seating bowl around the field. They had to reach it. If they could get to the rows of seats and use them for cover, they perhaps could keep enough distance between them and the Vespids until they got to the other side. There was a pharmacy just outside the stadium on the other end, and through the back, there was a secret entrance to a tunnel too small for Vespids to get through. It led all the way to another exit in a former fast food restaurant next to the base. The chief of base had created it, and it was their only possibility of escape now. He pushed ahead, his lungs burning, his legs aching as the corridor came closer and closer. "There, on the left," he shouted, but just as they came to it, another Vespid burst from the entry at high speed, skidding along the ground, but using its spidery legs to grind to a halt. Matt stopped suddenly and felt Sue collide with his back. Luke shouted in fright, and all 4 of them scrambled back. The Vespid roared at them, and the 4 Vespids coming behind them growled in response. They were trapped. Matt racked his brain. They had barely killed 1. 5 at the same time gave them 0 chance of survival. "Look, a door," Sue said frantically as she pointed. The Vespid in front of them charged. The Vespids from the back launched, and the 4 survivors dashed to the side, bursting through the metal door that was fortunately still on its hinges. The Vespids crashed into each other, snapping their jaws and swiping with their paws. Penelope was last through, and she turned to slam the door shut. A Vespid crashed into it from the outside, sending her stumbling away from the door. Matt and Luke both launched themselves at the door as it swung open. A tail of a Vespid with a scorpion-like stinger on the end came in, shooting at them. Matt dodged to the side, got to the door and swung it closed with all his might onto the Vespid's tail. The creature let out a squeal as it withdrew its tail. With Luke by his side, Matt pushed the door shut with all the might he could muster. "There is another door," Sue called. Matt turned to look and saw she was down the corridor with the flashlight that Luke must have passed to her. It was about 20 meters down the hall, and she was holding it open. Penelope was already halfway there. Matt and Luke struggled to hold the door they were at as the Vespid smashed into it again and again. The beasts were strong, double the size of regular wolves, all muscle, and every part of them was made to kill. Matt and Luke glanced at each other. They both knew what they had to do. "On 3, Matt said. "Why 3? Luke asked. "Okay, on 1 then." 1! They simultaneously let go of the door and turned to run. The corridor was only wide enough for 1 Vespid at a time, and that's what saved them. For as soon as the door swung open, 3 of the Vespids tried to get in at once. The only parts of them that got close to Matt were the stingers of their tails. By the time 1 Vespid won the battle and was in the tunnel running them down, they were almost at the door that Sue and Penelope were waiting at. "Come on, run!" They shouted in encouragement as Matt got through the doorway, soon followed by Luke. Sue slammed the door closed just in time as the Vespid crashed into it head first, making a dent in the center. Matt looked around quickly. They seemed to be in a locker room. There were broken lockers, turned over benches, and long forgotten pieces of clothing and water bottles. "Block the door with the benches," he said quickly. He grabbed a bench and slid it in front of the door as Sue, who had been holding it, stepped back. Luke and Penelope came with a bench next, then Sue and Matt with another. They continued until all the benches were secured next to the door. The whole time the Vespid on the other side was snarling and pushing against it. Only after the last bench was put in front did the door stop moving as much. They all stepped back, breathing heavily. "Another one," Penelope said. Sure enough, another door was wide open, partly off its hinges, assumedly leading to the field. As Matt turned his attention to it, he saw 2 glowing blood-red eyes approaching quickly down the corridor. Another Vespid. Matt pulled on one of the lockers and pushed it crashing to the ground in front of the doorway. The others soon caught on and followed suit with the other lockers. The Vespid crashed into the blockage as the 4 survivors supported it with their own weight. The Vespid wrestled against the metal lockers, pushing hard. hard. Matt was straining, his muscles tensed. There were gaps between the lockers and Sue used one of these to stab her knife through. The Vespid snarled in pain as the metal bit into its snout. Penelope swung with her hatchet and Luke followed through with his own knife, while Matt focused on holding the lockers in place. The Vespid's tail slid through the gaps, lashing out, but with another stab from Sue and Luke both, it did one more low growl, then collapsed, lifeless. Matt fell onto his backside, sweat covering him, breaths coming hard and forced. The Vespids were still outside the door, but seemed unable to get in, at least for now. He found himself smiling despite the situation. They were doing it. They were surviving. Guys? Luke said. Matt turned and his face fell. Sticking out of Luke's side was the scorpion-like stinger from the Vespid's tail, the absolutely worst thing that could possibly happen. He pulled the stinger out, his eyes locked with Matt's. "Luke," Sue said, starting to approach him. Matt jumped to his feet with a shout. "No, get away!" Sue froze as the change immediately started. It was why the Vespids had been able to take over so soon after arriving on the planet. It wasn't their aggression, speed, or even their hive minds that made them smarter the more there were in a pack. It was the change that happened whenever any creature, human or otherwise, was stung with the tail. At base, they called it going canine, and now Matt was witnessing it with his own eyes. Immediately, Matt saw Luke's skin turning dark yellow, with black veins spreading all over him. He let out a guttural scream as he looked at Matt, his eyes turning red. Then immediately, his bones started to crack audibly, his body reshaping into that of a Vespid. Luke clawed at his own chest as it happened. Matt clenched his wrench tightly. He had to end it. He had known Luke from before the Vespids. They had gone to the same high school, played football together, and partied together. But no matter. This was a mercy. He lifted his wrench and rushed forward. Just as he was about to swing, Luke looked at him with his elongating face. "No, please," he whimpered. Despite himself, Matt hesitated. "Do it, Matt," Penelope shouted. Matt gritted his teeth and swung. He connected with Luke's head and his friend fell to the floor. He was convulsing now. His spine was extending, as was his skull. His screams were turning more animalistic and the spider-like limbs were starting to grow from his chest. Tears sprang from Matt's eyes as he kept swinging. He only stopped once the partially transformed Luke stopped moving completely. His death was met with howls from outside the room. The Vespids must have started to connect with him through their hive mind. They could feel him. That's when the banging on the door renewed with increased aggression. The benches were being pushed back and the door hinges creaked ominously. Matt turned to Sue and Penelope. Sue was crying as well, while Penelope grimaced. The burns on her face made her look angry rather than sad. "It had to be done," Matt said, his voice catching slightly in his throat. "It was the rule. If any survivor got stung, it was a mercy to end their life before the transformation was completed." Sue came and hugged him. I know, she whispered shakily. Then another howl came from the corridor leading to the field. The barricade of lockers was not enough to hold another Vespid. Matt and Sue moved apart, only to see Penelope pointing up. Matt saw an open vent, wide enough for a person to fit through. It was their only chance. He picked up Luke's knife and gave it to Sue, who now had the two. Penelope still had her hatchet, and he had his wrench, which he now put in his waistband. He positioned himself below the vent, and Sue went first, using him as a step up. She grabbed the side of the vent and pulled herself into it. "How's it looking?" Matt asked. "Big enough for us, too small for the Vespids," Sue replied. Another howl came from down the corridor while Matt heard one of the hinges on the door snap. The benches were again pushed slightly away from the door with the force. It wouldn't be long before the Vespids got through. "You next, Penelope, come on." Penelope nodded and took a small run up before stepping onto Matt's connected hands and launching herself up. Sue helped her as she scrambled into the vent. One of the benches flew across the room, hitting Matt in the legs. He fell backwards, smashing his head on the floor. "Matt!" Sue cried. Matt's vision went blurry and he grimaced. He sat up slowly, his mind feeling like it was spinning in circles. He touched the back of his head and when he looked at it, blood was spread on his fingers. "Matt, come on, come on!" Sue shouted from above. He had to go, he had to. He pushed himself to his feet, trying to steady himself, but the room was swirling. Then the rest of the benches cracked as the locker room door burst open. A big black Vespid sprang into the room with a roar. The last thing Matt heard was Sue's scream before the Vespid's mouth grabbed onto him, its rotating razor-sharp teeth tearing him apart.